Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I thought we'd take a break from all this heavy stuff and talk about something that might be very useful to you right now. As you can see from the title, this is going to be called Escaping into Creativity. And, it should be viewed probably by two primary groups of people, and just in terms of me talking about the statistical probability. Not as in you should watch it, but it will most likely be just watched by two groups. Some of you are creative, and some of you enjoy creativity. So this is kind of like both sides of the fence. I want to encourage us to find something else to do, maybe, while we're sort of waiting for life to happen. And you'll be amazed how amazing things will happen in your life, and you start to draw in very exciting things into your life. I think most of you know by now, if you've watched the show for at least a dozen episodes or whatever, I've been in creative work environments my entire life. And there's all kinds of different creativity. We are going to hit some traditional kinds that I talk about all the time, but the tense of this episode is different. It is I'm encouraging you to seriously take a break from reality without getting into messing up your brain and other endeavors. Ooh, endeavorities. See, we come up with all kinds of new words here. We need someone to keep a track of all the weird words. We need a break. Let's have some fun. And let's do it this way. Now, I could just arbitrarily start talking to you about various things you could do, or maybe things you do, or things you did. And we will do that. We'll end with sort of a rekindling of perhaps your experiences in the past as it relates to your participation. But there's a different past that I think is something that I personally do, and it happened accidentally. And it becomes very, very useful to just clear your mind. Some people are going through a lot of stress right now for millions of reasons, and they need to just focus on something else and have it pre-qualified as something good. So instead of me trying to pick something out of your past, like a David Blaine trick, I'm going to give you some things I've been doing recently. And I'm not telling you to make you focus on my thing. While you hear me reminisce about things that I've been doing, I want you to think about how that relates to you and your past. Okay. I think all of us have movies that we love from the past. And what's interesting about movies from the past is, one, well, they're all in the past. It's by the time you get to see them. Only movies that you haven't seen seem like they're from the future. But you might like a film that released during your lifetime. And that has a whole smorgasbord of escape. Because you not only remember seeing the film, but you remember as the film as it applies to your life, right? Where were you when that movie came out? How old were you? Or where'd you go see it? Who'd you go see it with? How did you feel before you saw it? How did you feel while you were watching it? And how did it change your life after you watched it? Because if it's one of your favorite films, it has an effect on you. I was just telling a friend of mine, I forgot that there was a gigantic connection between the first day I felt like I had continuous memories of my life and Star Wars. I was 7 years old. My dad came home and said, "We're going to go see Star Wars, get ready." And it wasn't a normal thing for a 7-year-old to go, "Oh, let me just go change my clothes or wash my hands or whatever," to go to a movie. If usually a movie situation was not premeditated that much, you might be outside of a theater. Everyone's like, "What should we do?" Well, bam, we just take the car and go there. But Star Wars was premeditated. It was a beautiful day in Kansas. Summer had just arrived. I lived in the country. I was really enjoying where we were living. And I just remember walking down the hall. I have this vision of looking out the front door of the house with the screen door, which is funny because my sociology and Kansas civics teacher lives in that house now. I remember washing my hands, and I'm just thinking about it. And what's really strange is I had absolutely no memory of Star Wars before it came out. I had no trailers in my brain before I went and saw it. I should say not before it came out, but before I saw it. I go to this theater. We drive 27 miles away to Iola, Kansas, which is strange because our city had a theater too. It was big, but it must have been sold out or something. But I'm not complaining, because what ended up occurring was that they had a disco ball up on the ceiling, and they hit it with a light. And this is 1977, man. I'm about to turn 8 in around August. But I remember looking around the room at all these sparkles that are going around the room, and I had never seen that. I may have even seen it in a television and not realized what was making it occur. Because I did see Saturday Night Fever somehow, but I don't think I went. I know I didn't go to the movie for it. Maybe my dad bought it. He bought every single movie on planet Earth, but so I'm a little jumbled up when I see rentals. Obviously, I see Star Wars, just like all of us kids who got to see it with a sentient mind. It was like nothing else we'd ever seen. A dirty future. The most incredible casting, the most incredible characters. So I know that you have those experiences. If you grew up in the 70s and 80s, well, I know that you have dozens of those experiences, because there were dozens and dozens and dozens of movies released, at least between 75 and 85, that every human being on Earth who saw movies, they went and saw these films. Everybody saw E.T. Everybody saw Indiana Jones, all the Star Wars, Rocky. If you dug that sort of thing, you saw it. Poltergeist. All these incredible films. And even if you didn't get to see them way back in the past because you weren't alive, some of them are just such heirlooms to the film industry. You end up watching them somewhere, somebody's house. How many of you saw a movie with someone that you loved or someone that you were dating, even if it was like a teenage, puppy dog love sort of thing? Maybe you were blessed enough to see it with your spouse and it became, your guys' movie, whatever. I want you to reminisce with this a little bit in your brain. Let this episode itself just be an orchestration of you getting away from anything that is distracting you in your life. Be distracted by things that you love. Let all that chemistry that you had when you saw these things, experience these things, enter your body once again. And again, it's not important the things that I saw. Now, if you're generally the same age as I am or older, you will have most likely had the Star Wars experience as well. And for the younger folks, you just have to understand that movie was so humongous in the United States of America and the world that every single theater where I lived for probably a 500-mile radius threw every other movie out and put Star Wars in every single cinema. I think in Wichita, Kansas alone, somebody, I think, counted it up, and it was like 25 cinemas out of 25 cinemas were playing Star Wars, just back to back. And they were running it 24/7. But now that's one formula of seeing a film. Another formula of seeing a film is more on the rental side of things. And I'm willing to bet it's more focused within the film than an external environment, although we will always have exceptions to that rule. And that is seeing a film from the past that blew you away. A film that was made and released before you were born. And you got to see it on some sort of video. If you're old enough, you got to see it on TV or something like that. The Wizard of Oz. Casablanca, depending on how old you are. The Day the Earth Stood Still, Forbidden Planet, Planet of the Apes. These amazing films, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And then there's the films, like for me, the films that were made when I was a little too young to go in and see the film and understand it, but like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder. As I got older, Clockwork Orange, And so, I mean, some of you are going, that's not a warm, fuzzy film. Some of them are and some of them weren't. But then you start to realize something very interesting, and that is that, oh my gosh, look at all the talent that was in film, radio, television before I was even born. Some people had had their entire careers before I was ever born. Dorothy Kilgallen from What's My Line, her whole life before 1965. I mean, up until 1965. Tons and tons of these actors and actresses. But they made magic on the silver screen for us, didn't they? Now, if you're lucky, there's something out there right now that is new that you're enjoying. I enjoy the new Loki series. I think it's fantastic. It's a little slow moving, but the cast is amazing. Everyone's showing up for work, especially the writers. It's a big deal. There are some shows that have released in the last 20 years that I could watch over and over and over again. Carnival. Deadwood, first 3 seasons of Boardwalk Empire. Westworld. Brilliant, brilliant shows. I am now reminiscing through Red Dwarf. I am now also back on track with Taxi, trying to get to the last of season 4 and all of season 5. Chewed down 3 episodes today. And what's interesting about it is that you have an era in history where everyone was generally making good with the sort of moral code of humanity. If you were to watch Happy Days or something from the 70s and early 80s, well, it's just a positive show. What can you do, man? It's like watching Leave It to Beaver or something. If that turns you on, then go watch it. Marathon something. Twilight Zones. I can watch Twilight Zones infinitely. Absolutely love them. Now, let's look at music. Oh boy. Music. Music is so intense that I'm going to pull back a little bit from giving examples because you'd have to be like me to probably specifically have an experience that I've had with a particular song or a particular album. Now, there are legendary tracks for various generations. Eddie Van Halen's Eruption, the very first time anyone ever heard that. My God, that thing circled the planet. And then kind of weird tracks like Popcorn from 1969, which still gets kind of hummed and played to this day. Axel F. from Beverly Hills Cop. Rocket from Herbie Hancock. I mean, there's just certain weird tracks that just, they penetrate forever and ever and ever. Sweet Dreams. That riff at the beginning will make people happy for the rest of humanity. I mean, for the rest of time, But let your mind wander a little bit as you listen to my voice. Let it wander into your favorite song. Songs when you were out and about in the world, right? You're camping. You're at a lake. You're doing something. And these songs were very, very valuable to you. And it's not exactly, you can go play them to get that feeling. But for me, what I want you to focus on is the feeling that those moments gave you. And what's interesting about it is that you have music that you listened to as a child. Then your teens, then your 20s, your 30s. It's just, and a lot of times we all fall away from music as we get older. Life gets a little bit busy. When you're sitting there by yourself trying to fill up the space, that's where a lot of these things occur. Another little television area, which is sort of a caveat onto itself, is strictly for your childhood. Although today there's a lot of adult things we can watch. But cartoons, when you were a kid. You're a little kid. You're idealistic about the universe, hopefully. And you have your favorite cartoons when you were little. Maybe it's Tom and Jerry. Maybe it's Bugs Bunny. Yosemite Sam. The Pink Panther. All these reminiscent things. And what were you thinking when you were experiencing those things? Because a wise man once said, you should try to be childlike. It doesn't mean, bitty with your mother. It doesn't mean living with your parents. It doesn't mean being a child, specifically. It's be capable of being positive and seeing things the way you want them to happen, because you'll be surprised that greatly enhances your life. Let me give you another one, depending on your age. I really hope that some recent attempts to rekindle this come back, which are arcades. People, I'm seeing it online. I'm seeing it on Facebook a lot. I belong to a couple groups. But walking into an arcade, I got a whole episode on arcades. It's in the 90s in Season 1, so just go to the website and search on arcades. But it was an experience that if you ever had it, mixed a couple of these things together. Definitely mixed music, and it mixed the machines together. Simple games that had stories, easy to get into, cheap to play, immersive. It's funny, you would walk into these rooms that were dark, and they just had all the sounds from the machines, right? Dum, 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 dum. That was Space Invaders. And then you had, asteroids. Just the weird little noise of that little dude shooting his little missiles. I can't even emulate it. Pew, pew, pew might be the closest thing I could say to it, right? But a lot of times they'd be playing music. I think one of the first times I ever heard Lovin' Touchin' Squeezin' by Journey was inside an arcade. Not too loud, because they definitely want you to hear everything else. But you're a kid, and you're idealistic, and you'd walk into a room that's pretty much there to distract you completely. But as soon as you stared into the screen, just like with our iPads and our computers today, your brain just subtracts the rest of the room, almost subtracting the sound and all the visual input. Except that monitor. You were that ship. You were that little character, whatever you're playing, whether you're Mario, Pac-Man, Robotron. And the games innovated not only the story and the graphics and that kind of thing, but some of the cool innovations were the controls. Little buttons in one, joysticks in the other, fireball, right? You had a trackball and missile command. We got to live inside the creativity that other people put out. And when you're young, you're in the audience. You're in the audience observing other people's creativity. You go to a concert and you see someone on stage doing something. You go to the movie theater and you sit in the chair and you watch what other people did to put things on the silver screen. You play a game, well, you're playing what other programmers thought up. It's influencing you. It's defining for you the very spectrum of what is possible. But the entire time, the other interesting thing is you can sense that there's more to it. You can actually expand it more and more. Wouldn't it be cool if a game did this? Wouldn't it be cool if the story went that way? Wouldn't it be cool if we mixed that type of music with that type of music? Or we just made more of it? So what's interesting today is that there's this fascinating transformation that happens with all things. And you guys have done this no matter what you think. Before I even say this, you've done this. Now let me illustrate this to you. Let's say you're sitting in your living room today and I come in the room with DVDs of the original Buck Rogers episodes from 1930s, man. And I say, we're going to marathon Buck Rogers from the 30s. And you're like, okay. And I put the discs in and I started playing it, and you start to see this as like a space opera. You look at the special effects, and it's very, very evident that these are ships on strings, little fireworks out the back. When you see the costumes they're wearing, you can see they've got, like knobs and big buttons and things, and you can see how they did it. When you look at the computer screens, they didn't have computer screens back in the day, so they'd put someone on the other side of glass to fake they had screens. Very soon after, they did get some rear projection. But for a long time, it was all conventional in-camera stuff. No special effects really whatsoever. And you might be getting bored of me showing you Buck Rogers, right? You're like, oh, this is so corny. Look at the costumes. Look at the spaceships. That stupid, thingy-majiggy there. And here's what's funny about that whole thing. You're getting bored because you understand all the trickery that made these episodes occur. So the only thing that could be really appealing to you would either be the story or the nostalgia or both. Of just seeing what the OG folks did from those shows. But what you got to remember is that everybody who watched those shows back in the day, if they were lucky enough to go to the movie theater or have a television, they were blown away by that. Blown away. They kind of, some people in the audience, I'm sure, were like, oh, I can see how you did that. But other folks were like, gosh, how did you make the suits? How'd you even fake the fact that there's a person on a television monitor on another planet or in some other spaceship? How are those spaceships flying, But you figured it out instantaneously. And what's the value of that analogy for you? Well, anything that you're seeing today that's blowing your mind, when we show it to kids 80 years from now, they're going to be like, yeah, whatever. That's so stupid. I did that in grade school. Look at what we're doing now. And it's some other fully immersive 3D. You're watching this on the television, man. Why aren't you in the holodeck? Why aren't you in the Velt? So this happened to me several times. Video game technology. When we first saw, it was a Castle Wolfenstein, which is kind of a pseudo 3D, Doom, pseudo 3D. Then we got Unreal and Quake. We started seeing real 3D and a bunch of other kind of offshoot folks trying to displace the number one king of the hill dude. It's mind-blowing for a few years. And then right after that, you understand how it was done. And there's even books about how it's done. Well, today we live in an era where virtually every single thing that you're seeing is instantaneously explained. If you were curious, you can find out. So what you can do today in a creative realm is sort of infinite, right? Again, before I chose to do the intro to this show, I had never done anything remotely that aggressive in Blender 3D in my life. But what's fascinating is, because I've been putting together some old portfolio pieces, the only thing that was different in my life than other people's lives who consider themselves not to be creative, which everyone is, and that's just a law of the universe, right? Is that I got into various realms where I watched people right next to me do things they'd never done before in their life and do it extremely well, which set the standard that so can I. And it really was just like, well, why haven't you finished yet? Why? Come on. I know you've never done it before. It doesn't matter. Just do it. When I got into industries where we were just, cutting edge, bleeding edge technology, man, no one had ever done this before. I've always been in a company like that without even trying. And so you have engineers that go, well, I had this problem and I thought about it all weekend and I came up with this solution. I came up with two solutions. This one was faster than the other one, so I think we're going to go with option 2 over 1 or whatever. I saw the process. I saw how you do it. But the number one thing is to realize that you can. You just got to try it. You might think you're too busy. Well, there are people that work harder than me. There's a bunch of them. But I tell you what, if you can just get up to half of my output or half of my hours spent and all the other things are going. Now, if you have a bunch of new kids, I get it, but I guarantee you can find time to do some of these things. But the cool thing is there's no deadline if it's just your little project. That's what's cool about it. But I want to stress for this episode, you creating anything, it's not important right now. Go back in the audience for a little while. Enjoy it. Maybe go back and look at stuff you've done in the past and enjoy it. Give yourself some credit. Don't worry about being arrogant. I know a lot of people, and even I did this too, was like, I will tell you, and this is just a weird thing about the universe, it used to gag me to no end to see people brag about themselves. I mean, really boast. And then I realized that they're super duper successful, and because they did it, everyone knew that that's what they did. If you get too humble, then nobody knows you ever did anything. And you're like, why can't I get any more work? Why can't I get this? It's because nobody knows you do it. Now, obviously, there's a way to inform folks and there's a way to brag about stuff. So you want to kind of obviously be more, I think, on the end of informing, but at the same time, give yourself some accolades if you were able to do something at a fairly amazing level. I enjoy it when people tell me how badass they are. I really do. But now let's loop back. Let's go back to the past a little bit. We're having some fun, right? I want this to be just a beautiful montage in your brain of your life so far, because there's hopefully some good moments coming up here. There were times in your life where something happened that is unlike anything else that's ever happened to in your life, and they're very simple things. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and the subject of riding a bike came up. And, when I was a little kid, my dad got me, and I had this same issue when I was a dad too. He got me a full bike for like a teenager. And then he tried to teach me when I was 3 or 4 years old on how to ride a bike. And of course it had the training wheels on it and stuff. But this thing was so big that it was actually at least as heavy as I was. And so trying to balance it was a lot more difficult. I think that's one of the factors. 4 more years pass and I still can't ride this bike. And then finally my friend's dad, I must have been 7 or 8 years old. And it's a gravel road. I mean, of all things, I couldn't balance it in a city or a town setting with a nice paved road because I was too small. But man, I will tell you, and I think every single one of you have ever balanced a bike in your lifetime, that moment when a bike balances, there is a very bizarre feeling, something that happens that seems almost illogically wonderful. Why is it that when the bike balanced, you have this, I don't know, like a frontier in front of you or something, and you're a little kid. You're not seeing, I'm going to drive across the country, I'm going to launch to another planet. But boy, it almost feels that way, doesn't it? And there are probably at least half a dozen of those events in your life. Because, I could say things like, you move out of your parents' house for the first time. Let's say it's all amicable and great. Maybe you're going to college. Maybe you're getting your own place. Maybe you got a good job. But for whatever reason, you have been under your parents' rule your whole life, and now you're out on your own. And now you get to eat whatever you want, get up whenever you want. You can clean the house if you want, leave it dirty if you want. But you also have chores. I mean, if you don't clean your clothes, then you're going to start stinking. And it can be very, very empowering. But that one's a little bit more on point, isn't it? But what's interesting about that euphoric feeling is it's very similar to the bike riding feeling. Similar. When you first drive a car, you have this wild feeling. It is a bizarre and I think almost like-minded feeling with something that you did that you experienced that was creative, either be it from someone else or from you. Because I think it expands your brain just a little bit, what you're capable of doing. And the reason why I think this episode is important, especially in this time of the year, his time in history, is that, let me ask you, if I gave you literally a copy of the bicycle that you learned to balance on, and I said, hey, there's a giant parking lot right there. Why don't you ride around a little bit, have some fun? And then you get on, you'd be like, man, I haven't ridden a bicycle in 20 years. I don't even know last time I rode a bicycle, to be honest. I'm sure I can do it, right? It's just like riding a bike. Remember that old saying? And so you balance and you ride around. Now, you're going to have that same feeling you had when you were a little kid. Maybe microscopically, but probably not. Now, all of us drive vehicles, usually. So when you're driving a car today and you sit in traffic for half an hour to an hour or more, are you feeling that amazing feeling you did when you were 14, 16, 18? Nah. It went from like this euphoric thing to, oh my God, I got to commute. Right? Now when you live on your own, is it a big deal? No, it's not, right? And that's why we have to remember what it was like. See if we can find new ways to feel those feelings. If nothing more, just to have a memory, just to enjoy things, right? When I tell you that I see every once in a while these overlaying realities, I think the best way to describe it would be taking all those euphoric little moments in life and compressing them into a giant feeling like that where, wow, that world that I'm seeing on top of the one I'm experiencing, everyone has their head on straight, right? Everybody loves everybody. Everyone's in a creative realm. We're all working together. It's like almost a Gene Roddenberry world, except it doesn't necessarily have to be futuristic at all. It's just kind of an alternate reality where people are getting it right. And I won't lie that I think most of us will have visions of the world where it's like that, but I don't sit around, crying in my pillow at night because that's not occurring, to the point I'm forcing myself to have some hallucination or something. It really does feel like there's a way that once you tune your mind to a world like that, and the more that you can see, the full spectrum of what would have to occur in society to make it like that, seeing it is merely piercing through multiple realities and seeing the one that matches the way you're thinking. But I truly, truly believe that we pick the next second of our life. But now here's my regiment for myself. And it happened accidentally. And these franchises aren't perfect, right? I mean, some of them are perfect in that they don't go dark. Some of them have little hidden things in them. You can kind of see maybe what an agenda was back in the past. But if you just divorce yourself from all that, like I said, when you go to Disneyland, for instance, there's some of us that go and see Walt's fingerprints. And it's not that we don't enjoy other people's creative work since he's been dead, but we definitely see his fingerprints. We think that's what this place is really about, regardless of all the sponsorship and all the other junk that's in there. The commercialism. Okay. So what I do is I pick franchises that I love, and I will marathon them as I'm working. I'm always sitting on my computer doing something. And so I'm out there being creative on my computer and being inspired by perfection on TV. That's some of the easier ways to do it. And what's interesting about it is that if you click over into something like YouTube and you're just marathoning educational videos or just interesting interviews, maybe a little documentary here and there, that's fun. That's cool. But you're not getting the sort of complete package that you get with some of these anthology shows like Twilight Zone, where just every single thing was so polished. There's so many little Easter eggs in episodes that I actually have a book that if you go see my Twilight Zone episode where I review some of my favorite episodes, I got this book with me and it's just brilliant. I mean, some of the names on windows are cast members or other people that participated in some way, shape, or form, paying homage to folks. It's very fun. Some of them are funny. Some of them are a little scary. Some are just creative and interesting, right? Some of you don't know what Red Dwarf is. It's a British comedy series. It started, I believe, in 1988. It's still going to this day. They just filmed the last season in 2020, or at least released it in 2020. And it's brilliant. I get it through BritBox on my TV through Amazon. And I just marathon the crap out of that thing right now. I think I've been through the seasons, all of them, twice in the last 2 months. I'm currently chewing up a third view of it. And what's funny is because I'm working and looking up and working and looking up, I'm getting sort of the overall mean of its humor. But because I look down during a scene, next time I'm looking up and oh wow, I forgot I didn't get to see that scene. I know this episode really well. I know how it ends. I know how it begins. But that joke I totally missed. And then I get to laugh again. And believe me, that's a lot of shows. Now for me personally, music is a little one-dimensional. And music for me can bring up sort of a missing nostalgic feeling, which I don't necessarily enjoy. It will totally remind me of my past or something when I was that age or that was a thing. And music, again, for me, I'm very picky. Like, I don't think any Eric Clapton song does anything make you depressed. Very talented man, but it doesn't, he always is depressing. Everything's in a minor key, cocaine. It's like, really? That's the kind of emotion? Nah. Not for me, anyway. There's a lot of us that marathon shows like Star Trek. All the different shows, all the different seasons. And it's one of these things where if you like that franchise, you'll go, well, I don't know if I want to get into this. It's really involved, right? I mean, you really got a huge amount of episodes. And then you watch a couple and you're like, oh my God, this is why this show is so amazing. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Skip the intro. You go to the next one. Back in the day, let's just say 60 years ago, getting into some of these creative arts was very expensive and very difficult. Finding a mentor to teach you how to do movie editing, real physical movie editing, was really rough. Now, every human being has a 4K camera inside their telephone. Look at all the creative stories that people put together for Instagram and now Facebook. It's amazing. Some people have very creative things. They're showing you their life and they're putting words and they're making things funny. But now imagine if these same individuals pause their life for a second, which is blasphemy in this world, right? To think for a second, get a blank piece of paper and a pen, and start jotting down an idea. What if you had to shoot, pretend like you're I'm giving you this as an example for other things, just think of this as an analogy or something. But you had to shoot a 1-minute story. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every second, just think about it as 60 minutes, but 60 seconds. A 10-second setup, a hook in the next 10 seconds, 20 is gone, 40's left. Your act 2 is just the next 20 seconds. You carry something forward, you turn it at 30 seconds, you build it all the way up. If you really need to, take the next 20 seconds to build up some big conclusion or something that needs to occur, and the last 10 seconds are whatever the big payoff is for what that was, what your story needs to be in the end. Could be someone with a skateboard contemplating an amazing maneuver. They're looking down at a really formidable pit they're going to drop into. Or they're going to ride a rail for a really long time. Some parkour kid, looking at some insane jump. But he makes it. Could just be you and your cat. You have a morning ritual, an evening ritual, an afternoon ritual. Cat's usually there, you're usually there, and there's some scenario. Now, let's touch for a split second on things that you used to do that you don't do anymore, that haven't eroded in your interest. You're just like, man, I used to do that. Why am I not doing that anymore? For me, I got dozens of them, man. I used to paint a lot. My house had canvases all over the place, paint. Unfortunately, we didn't have 4K telephones. And so I sold a bunch of stuff and I'll never see it again. I mean, that's kind of cool if it still exists out there. Probably not. There was a point I was just throwing them away. I mean, not really, but I was like $50 for that, $100 for that. And I could have had 10 times that amount, right? But, sometimes you might just doodle. Your version of doodling in whatever it was that you used to do. Man, just see how it feels. Don't add any pressure to yourself. By no means. And again, if you want to stay in the audience right now for this year, I think it makes sense. Relax, enjoy. Get yourself your favorite beverage, whatever it is, right? You'll know if you enjoy pressure. If you enjoy a little bit of pressure that makes you excited, then maybe doing some of these old things you used to do is for you. If you're already stressed, well, then don't do any of that stuff. Go enjoy the stuff that you used to enjoy. Go find an old movie that you love and sit back, relax, and don't worry about finishing it even. Just let it play as long as it entertains you. Split it up over 2 or 3 days. That's a nice thing about a lot of the apps on our TVs. They remember. I will typically cut short a Red Dwarf episode after watching maybe, a good 8 episodes, a good 4 hours or so. It's a little shorter than that. One's stuck in the middle, and so I come back the next day and, that's where I am. That's great. I like looking at the sets. I like looking at how things evolved from 1988 when they almost had no money at all. And just seeing what they did to pull it off. If someone holds a little laser gun, I want to look at it and go, man, is that a squirt gun? Is it a hairdryer with some stuff on it? Does it look like somebody built it out of wood? Does the trigger move? How's this thing working? I think, I had an episode at least once in this entire show where I was sort of cautioning folks of perpetually living in the past. And I want to make a distinction about that caution versus what I'm saying here. Because one comes with a little bit of a guilt trip, and one of them has no guilt whatsoever. The living in your past thing would mean that nothing is happening now at all in any realm of your life. Every day is waking up and trying to be the previous you. Now, there could be a beautiful method of that because maybe you had turned into someone who wasn't so fantastic in the mirror. And I've definitely had those eras in my life. Or maybe just an element of my character that that dude needs to go. That behavior needs to go. But that's not what we're talking about in this particular case. This is just enjoying things that you enjoy. Guilt-free, man. Guilt-free. And the funny thing is that if you take any sort of cues from me, you can be creative at the same time you're enjoying what you enjoy. You don't have to. There's no guilt and there's no demands. You're here to make yourself feel wonderful during a time when perhaps there's things that are not making you feel wonderful. Maybe looking through a photo album of your family and friends. The physical kind back in the day, the old Polaroids that you put between the plastic paper. Maybe get those things out. If you have some old 8mm or 16mm film, go see how it's doing. Get that old projector out. Blow the dust off. Pull down a screen. Shoot it against the wall. Explain to your kids something that you haven't explained to them in the last 10 years of their life, and now they're old enough to really appreciate it. Reminisce about things that you did when you were young. What's also real interesting about sort of the historical reminiscing is I want you to think about, just as a fun little exercise, and hopefully this kind of episode will put you to sleep, Just let this roll in the background, right? Is that when we were little, I don't know about you, but the world didn't seem as big when I was a little kid. It seemed big in one way because, when you got to go outside, when you maybe get in your late 10s to your teens and you're allowed to ride your bike around the block or go downtown or whatever if you live in a small little town. It seems a little big at first, and you seem like, oh my gosh, because of this bicycle, I'm able to go a lot of different places. So you have that independent capability because you learned how to balance your bike. But eventually, even that little microcosm becomes small. I have my house. I have the baseball field across the street. If you go up this street, you hit Main Street, and if you take a left, you go to the bike shop with all the pads. You go to the right, there's the movie theater. Across the street's the arcade. Be careful crossing the street. But that's your domain. You learn how to do it. What's nice about that is you get a little bit of diversity with the real estate that you have control over. And within that offering, because there's businesses and all these other kind of things, you're able to build your list of things you want to accomplish in the day. Want to go up to the dirt mound and play with your Hot Wheels? You can do it. Sorry, ladies, I don't have a lot of girl experiences. If you're like me, I've been around a bunch of different places before I came to California, and then since California, I've been all over the place, right? But the ones that I remember the most probably is when I was a little kid. The grocery store I used to steal everything from. The TG&Y I used to steal everything from. The grade school I used to go to and how to get there and what the walk home was like. Used to take my dirt bike, my motorcycle. I was about 9 years old before they took it away from me. And we'd wander out of town because, man, it was like just a couple blocks away and you were in the wilderness. I mean, you were you were in fields. You could just drive around, man. Crazy. And what was strange about it for me was that the country house I had the Star Wars experience in was in a circle. And for those of you who don't know, it's just outside of town, 2 or 3 miles, where you got no city or town looking neighborhoods. You just have this circle. It'll have like 20 homes on it. And at the edge of the circle, well, if you just keep going, you're in the middle of fields and you just drive around on old dirt roads and mess around. I can remember those places in some cases better than I remember places I used to go to as an adult. I will say one of the fun things that YouTube provides is this ability to kind of explore your past. Let's say that you were of course I'm dating myself like crazy here, but you just replace it with your thing. My family had the Atari 2600 home game system. And so you'd be like, oh yeah, I remember that old thing. And you look up videos and there were brand new videos where kids who were, in their 20s or 30s, they didn't grow up with the machine natively, but they discovered it and they fell in love with it. And you watch them, they get these machines off eBay and they hook them all up with all the old retro cables and things to a flat-inch screen, little converter boxes and that kind of thing. And they'll have a brand new experience, and you get to sit and watch them have a brand new experience, and you'll think about your brand new experience, but it was 4 decades ago or more. That could be kind of cool. Your favorite movie. There's all kinds of cool videos about the backstories of those videos. Those movies, I should say. The thing is if you ever have had the feeling, doesn't matter how old you are, but if you've ever had the feeling that when you were younger, some aspect of the world was better than it is today. All right. Well, if you combine a little theory that I've suggested several times on this show based on the research that I've done, which is basically reading research papers all around the world throughout time, it's pretty evident that human beings communicate just by being in proximity to each other without opening their mouths. Just like Scatman Crothers said in The Shining, right? Mr. Halloran, right? Well, if you're sort of reminiscing some of these really cool things, and man, you might bring over a friend and say, man, have you ever seen Forbidden Planet? And they go, what's that? You're like, okay. Do you like old sci-fi, like high-budget sci-fi? Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, this is the best movie you're ever going to see from that era. There's other great ones, This is one of the best ever made. Leslie Nielsen, that dude from Naked Gun. Oh, yeah, that guy, yeah. Well, he was a serious actor initially. You're going to see Walter Pidgeon. And if you like Star Trek, well, this is where the whole franchise came from. Gene Roddenberry said it over and over again. Unlike a lot of folks, he gave credit where he got his idea. And he even changed it and made it better. This is where it started. And just bring a friend over. That's what I do with my friend Dave. He's the one I'm rewatching Taxi with. But if you're a fan of a show that nobody else likes necessarily, well, you just don't worry about that. You just get it out and you watch it. You marathon that thing. And I'll tell you what, a little trick. Let's say times are tough and you don't have money to, subscribe to all these different services and what have you. Well, they're all giving you 7 to 14-day trials. So what you do, especially like if you want to watch an HBO thing and you're like, man, I really can't really afford to start a subscription. I don't like the subscription model thing. You get your computer all set up and you subscribe to the trial. And then you immediately go into your account and you cancel the subscription renewal. So now you got your 7 days, your 14 days, and then you haul butt through the show that you want to watch. And the trick is that I think most of the time it's just linked to your email address. I'll let you think about how you might get real creative with maybe changing your email address and continuing the process until the economy rebounds and you're like, no problem. I won't even subscribe. I'll just go buy the box set off Amazon or whatever. The cool thing about creative escapes is that it's pretty much up to you. There can be a creative escape in just about anything, but an escape is an interesting thing, Someone has told you a story, most likely, even if it's just lyrics in a song. The melody is an escape. But whatever it is, it just helps you take a break from your day-to-day churn, and it allows you to rest your mind, rest your soul, and be entertained. I put a lot of pressure on episodes for people to, be creative. And I forget this beautiful thing about being a spectator. And it could sound like I'm passively aggressively attacking the spectator by pressuring you to create your own stuff. You're grown adults. If you want to create something, to do it. Some of those other episodes are more sort of pep talks to get you interested, to give you sort of a muse online. Or a mentor, or someone who's like your personal trainer. Come on, let's do it. Because that's what you're looking for. Well, that's what the other episodes are for. This one is devoid of that necessarily. We mention what you might do to have some fun. I mean, I've never heard this done, but I'll give you a little funny exercise. And by God, it's 2:46 in the morning, and the traffic is crazy outside my house here. But now imagine that you could even do this with a friend. There's games where you do this on a word-by-word basis. But imagine, and I have heard this done before, I guess that's true. I've heard it done with the alphabet too. You have to use the next word as to be the next letter in the alphabet sort of thing. But forget all that discipline. But what is a story? Let's say you think you have a little story in you. But every day you have a rule. You write one sentence every day. Maybe you make it a paragraph if you feel more aggressive. Maybe you write a paragraph and you have to give it to a mutual friend of yours who understands what you guys are trying to do. And they write a paragraph, just through email. And you give yourself some leeway where you're like, it doesn't have to happen, every single day because I know you get busy. Probably best to do it by yourself. It might get frustrating to share it with someone, unless you guys are just happen to be right in the same pocket. But it's that old analogy I used to give you guys all the time, which is the analogy of chopping down a redwood tree with a hatchet. Those big giant redwood trees that are so gigantic they can cut a hole through the base and drive a semi through it. It's almost kind of funny. Like I guess they had to at one point. But man, I would be a little nervous to be the first guy to drive under that thing. But if you had a hatchet and you just took a little chip off every single day, poor tree, it eventually would fall. It's just mathematics, right? Well, there's a lot of things in life that maybe look daunting, like too big. I just had to model a giant hotel in Marina Del Rey. And man, I was looking at this thing going, geez, it was it's a big hotel. Balconies and glass railing and a big pool down below with all kinds of glass partitions and a giant weird shaped pool and a jacuzzi and palm trees everywhere. And, and I had to do the bar and the restaurant inside. And this has to be good enough for the people that are paying to upgrade this place to choose what the designer has done. But there's also boats in the bay. There's an ocean out there. And I could technically skip some of that stuff, but then again, at the end, my portfolio wouldn't be so great. It'd be like, where are the boats? Why is it black out there? Why is the sky right there? So I did it all. But boy, I've done a lot of 3D in my lifetime, as you know. And, it wasn't as hard as the intro. The intro was hard because I was trying to research what the hell that room looked like. And some of those shapes were really hard to make. The pod was really, really tough to make, man. And because it's Kubrick, man, there's no way I can put anything out that he wouldn't approve of. And I probably didn't quite get it to my absolute perfection polish, but then it had to be done at some point, right? But what I'm trying to get across to you is there are ways of being creative where it's very pressure bound, and you just have to be a person that either likes that stuff or you don't configure it like that. I do love creating things in really short periods of time where the people receiving it don't believe that it was created that quickly. I once had to create a big building in Costa Mesa that I had no specs on the building. I just had to fly around it in Google Earth or Google Maps or whatever. And I kept looking at this building, like trying to figure out the units so it would all be proportional. And eventually I figured it out. I created like Legos basically and put this thing together. And it looks perfect for me for 2 days' work. A buddy came to me and said, I own my buddy owns chocolatecity.com, and he wanted me to create this futuristic city. Or at least I know what he needed. And he was like, okay, man. Sat out here on this porch for 3 days. Just pounding out building after building after building, just crazy futuristic stuff. It wasn't final product kind of stuff, but it definitely got to a level where he could make the pitch he was going to make, right? But the goal of this show is just, this particular episode, is just relax and go get the good stuff back out again. It's almost like that old saying, it's good to stop and smell the flowers every once in a while. Even though humanity is always going through ups and downs, the cool thing about it is that the past that you love is the time when humanity got it right for you. Maybe you go to work and, you don't typically listen to music when you're going to work. You just don't. It's not like you don't like your old songs, but you pull out those old tracks and you're like, oh my God, this is so good, man. I was driving my car the other day, and I was like, I need to, I want to listen to some music in my car. It's a beautiful day. So I just got up my app on my phone, played some tracks I had on my phone. That was kind of cool, but then I was kind of bored of those tracks. So I jumped out on a service with, songs. And I've played enough songs that they're kind of recommending songs to me. And I think it was the Isley Brothers' Fight the Power song. For me, that bass line is what my soul sounds like inside to me. And all of a sudden, I'm driving in my car, and it was like whatever experience I was having on a sunny day, enjoying the area that I live in, this thing doubled, tripled, quadrupled that feeling. I just felt good. I felt like my insides were coming back into my ears. It was fantastic, right? But they say, laughter is the best medicine, right? So maybe you watch a comedy, some old Blazing Saddles thing, your version of Blazing Saddles, whatever that is for you. But whatever it is, if you dump a bunch of positivity in your body, something nostalgic, man, what could go wrong, maybe if you locked yourself in your house and for 2 weeks didn't talk to anybody and went through this experience, maybe that'd be a little too much. But everything is in moderation, right? Everything's a marathon, not a sprint in most cases. Even when I'm talking about cranking out something really fast for a designer, it's just a marathon. It's just, because it gets grindy after a while, because sometimes things aren't complex. You know how to do everything that you want to do. You just got to do a bunch of it, that's all. Just let someone else do it, Let someone else bring you magic. I'd be interested in sort of some of the things that are those magical moments, both on a entertainment level where someone else created something maybe we can all see, right? You say, I love that song, I love this band, I love these particular movies, I love this television show. But it'd be also really endearing to hear any of you talk about, like, I went on this trip to whatever, some lake. You had a picnic with your family when you were a kid. Maybe it's the last time you saw one of your relatives for whatever reason. It's just good. You just have a great memory of that whole thing. I do want to share a bit of a digression, sort of on that level. Both myself and a very close friend of mine here in town, we've both had dreams where we met our relatives that have passed. Just one. Each one of us had a relative. I had my grandfather on my mother's side, and she had her aunt on her mother's side, who was like her grandmother, kind of. Her grandmother and her aunt were like best friends. And I think I'd had mine about a week before she did. And I was just, my dream was pretty much started where I was in the family room of my grandfather's house. It still exists, but he's no longer there. No one of the family owns that house anymore. And I just turned the corner into this country kitchen from the 70s. And my grandfather came out of the living room, and he always used to wear these overall, like these jumpsuits, like the sort of suits you would visit oil wells in or something. It's just what the old guys wore back in those days. I don't even know what the hell you call them. And he just had this huge smile on his face, and he was at least an inch or two shorter than me. And he was always sort of he was either really jokey or very stern, very kind of stoic kind of guy. But he had the biggest smile on his face. And he didn't even say anything to me. But he just walks in like, can you believe we're together right now? And no one else was in the room, but I had the feeling that the house wasn't empty. And I just went up to him in the kitchen, and I just gave him a huge hug. And the dream was over. And then my friend, I had forgotten the story, but she met her aunt in Michigan, and she got to hug her as well. Very interesting, right? And there's some like little sign of the time stuff going on. I don't know. But that was like a weird dream nostalgia. It felt wonderful for both of us. And the interesting thing is her aunt had family in Michigan, and I think what had happened was her aunt lived most of her life in Kansas. I think she had moved into an assisted living place in Texas, for sure. And then my friend's mother had this idea, hey, you haven't seen your cousins in a really long time, and you're getting old. Why don't we do a little road trip or something? Must have been a flight. And flew her to Michigan. And unfortunately, in kind of a twist of things, she slipped and fell and broke her hip. And then eventually couldn't leave because of the damage and passed away in Michigan. Surrounded by family, which was kind of endearing, right? And in the real world, in the last, I guess, week, her mother went back to Michigan to visit those cousins. And that's when, unbeknownst to her mom was there. And she had the dream of meeting her aunt at that location. So it was some weird serendipity, right, that all came together. And again, I think the fabric of the universe is way more interesting than we think. And we have evidence, if we let it in, that that's the case. So take it where you can get it, you know? You deserve some positivity in your life. No matter where you are in life, you deserve some positivity. Go get the good stuff, man. Go get the stuff that you know is just, it's just certified for you. 100%. Doesn't matter anything I said. Don't worry about any of my preferences, of course. And, you know, share some of that stuff if you can. You might find there's some like-minded people out there. So hopefully you dug this episode. Hopefully this is a nice break from all the goulash that we've been having to eat lately. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, I did replace the template with a template that looks very similar to the one I had just recently updated, and immediately all the bugs went away. Must be that the one I put up there was crappy. So that's fully functional now. And most of it worked, but there was like some news categories that weren't working and other things. So hopefully, let me know if you have any problems using the site, if the colors aren't right in a particular area. And like sometimes, because I color things a little darker, and sometimes we'll have like dark gray on black, and you're like, man, it's there, and I can read it, but it's not easy. Do let me know if that's a problem for you guys. But just remember, every episode's on there, so you don't have to worry about where I put an episode in the world. It's all there. But as I always say, it's got audio, video, social media, all new remastered Season 1. And what that means is I took out all the cigar drags. I had to take out all the proprietary music because they were just blocking videos at the music level. The music companies were blocking it, not YouTube. And if, you know, there are some episodes that were completely banned, just a couple out of like 100, and they're over at BitChute.com. So we are completely over BitChute. Please go to BitChute and just make an account. Subscribe if you would. I'd appreciate that, but it's not as important as just making an account over there. The other social media things I haven't broke down the various social media options you have out there, but we are on minds.com. That's one of my favorites out there. It's a little less interactive, unfortunately. Hopefully they can upgrade that platform to be a little bit more thready like Facebook. I did finally get 107 Daily to work. They just got a bug in their link script, which I can't believe they still have this bug and no one's saying anything. If I click on anything, it doesn't work. So I know how to get there and get it to work. We're on gab.com as well. You dig Gab. So get on over there. If you just prefer to get the feed from over there, it's great. Now, of course, if you're a subscriber to YouTube, that obviously helps us out quite a bit. Trying to get over 5,000. Today is literally a record high at 4,885. We'll see if they allow that to sustain itself. Again, I don't think we're posting anything that's a direct major threat to anything, so we should be okay. Got a bunch of cool episodes planned for the remainder of this season. But as soon as this is over, if you're brand new to the show, what ends up happening is I take a break, but I put out what's basically special reports or extended episodes while we're on the break. So you don't lose new episodes. For all those who support me on Patreon and PayPal, thank you so much. PayPal is pretty hit and miss in terms of people donating funds over there, but when they do, it's usually pretty significant, so I appreciate that. Again, the store is going to get a lot of love during the break. But yeah, Patreon gets you not only episodes about 12 hours before everyone else gets them, unless I'm running behind, and then I push them out very quickly, but you also get fireside chats. And so you can get just a lot of metadata about the show, and I give you a lot more data about potential episodes that are coming. You can vote on them, let me know. Like we just did a round of that, and 591 is going to be literally a Patreon picking an episode. So there you go. You can be one of those folks. And you're all welcome to suggest topics. I do store your topics in a particular way on my computer, such as like, hey, have you ever heard of this dude? And so I'll go to your link or go look the person up, get a kind of a synopsis, see if there's anything I can bite on right away without any major dive. But if it's a major dive, then I just bookmark it. Just know that we do have to kind of, make sure it's interesting for as many people as possible. I have ideas about technology episodes, and I go research, and I'm like, well, there's not really an episode there. But if you do have episodes or like little videos that you see that seem to be really interesting, and it's just some guy at a podium with a presentation or something, and you're like, wow, that sounds cool. I'd like to hear what, Deep Thoughts Dude, what you think about this, and add all your special sauce to it. I love those, especially the shorter they are, the better. But just know that if you suggest an episode, I want you to kind of produce it for me a little bit, kind of go, okay, this dude does this. What's interesting about this guy is this, this, and this. So I think you would do great reflecting on that. So anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.